Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Heisenbuttle.
And I'm Mike Carlson.
Welcome to The View from the U. Mike, what a week in college football. Really insane week. I'm going to start first by talking about my Michigan Wolverines, who, of course, are your favorite subject. These guys are just making me so angry. I mean, Sean Morris in this last week, so much controversy, shall we say, with him showing symptoms of concussion during the game, being put back in, and then Michigan still not coming away with that little brown jug.
Ryan, right now, Michigan football is, they're on my hit list, for lack of a better word. I'm not, really liking what Brady Hoke is seeing, and there's speculation that Jim Harbaugh, could come back to Michigan, and I think every day, Brian, after watching his Niners play this weekend, granted they came away with the win, I gotta think that Jim Harbaugh, he could be paying a visit to the University of Michigan, after this NFL season is over.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful having that alum network there. But let's talk about Brady Hoke. This guy, I don't believe he's right for the job. My family doesn't believe he's right for the job. I don't think anyone in the state of Michigan, except maybe those in East Lansing, believe he's the right man for the job. But this is the first time in their amazing history of Michigan football that they've had 3 losses in September. So, Mike, when you have a team like this with such high expectations, and you've had those good teams in the past years, having Devin Gardner absolutely flop, not coming away with those big division wins, getting blanked by Notre Dame. I mean, what does the future hold for this program?
I think the future holds an entirely new direction for Michigan. I think you have to rebuild. It's simple that you have to recruit better. You have to recruit better skill position players. You really have to recruit in all facets of the game. I mean, you want to look at a guy who recruits really well. Look at Nick Saban. I mean, the guy, he's a great coach, but he's an even better recruiter. He'll sell you on his university very quickly. So I think it starts with that. You got to recruit better players. You got to get a new coach, and you got to implement a better offense. Running quarterbacks, Brian, they're exciting quarterbacks to watch. But if you're me, you got to have a quarterback who can pass the ball, who can step up in the pocket and make good throws. I'm not by any means, wanting a pro-style offense at Michigan. I think you got to go spread offense, but you don't with an emphasis on the quarterback not running. So maybe look to the Eagles in the pros or even Notre Dame. They seem to run it very well with Everett Golson in the pocket. So it's a total rebuild, ground up. Keep your veteran coaches. Fire Brady Hoke, fire your offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators. Start from the bottom.
Yes, Rich Rodriguez, if you want to come back, we'd be happy to have you. But Mike, let's talk for a minute about Devin Gardner. I've had the privilege over this past few years of going to a few Michigan football games, and Mike, when you walk around Michigan Stadium, every single poster seems to have this guy. I mean, all the advertisements, all the promotions, the programs, they all have pictures of that number 98. And Mike, this really isn't a good direction for the program because they're expecting him to be that guy, and they sort of came to the season saying, all right, this is our senior quarterback, he's experienced, he's going to make some noise, but that's really not what's happening, especially when you have guys like Devin Funchess who can take the pressure and can perform.
Exactly, and I think that, Denard Robinson, he kind of set the standard for Michigan quarterbacks when he was there, but I don't think Devin Gardner, is a quarter or a half of the athlete that, Denard Robinson was, and I think that if you're Michigan, you can't put that load on a guy like Devin Gardner. You can't have him taking hits, you can't have him running the ball. Minimize the offense for him, funnel it to him, give him, a couple looks. I think that, right now, too much pressure's on Gardner. And it's obviously showing early in the season, Brian. Any person can't handle this pressure. It's not a knock against Gardner. It's just a knock saying that, as human beings, you can't handle that pressure as being the guy at Michigan.
Yeah, and you want to talk about being the guy. Going through some of the Michigan bookstore shops, they have the special edition Penn State night jersey. It's really cool. Only sold in number 98, which is very interesting that the one number that they sell may not start, let alone play in that game. Exactly,
and if I'm Michigan, obviously offer a wider selection of jerseys because if I'm a guy and my jersey is the only jersey I'm seeing on campus, I'm flattered, but at the same time, Ryan, there's that expectation in the back of your head, Michigan, it's going to start from the ground up, but I have a bright future if all those things go well.
Yeah, let's move away from utter and complete sadness into your Heisman talk.
Yes. Let's talk Heisman. Okay, my 4 candidates right now. I think Marcus Mariota right now for me, Brian, is the front runner. He's put together a flawless season. He's done everything at the quarterback position you can ask for. He's winning games. He's passing the ball. He's running the ball. I love what I'm seeing. Next, I got to talk Everett Golson. I think he's a sneaky Heisman contender this year. Very good quarterback on a very good team. A team that could be in the top 4 and could have a playoff. Come January. I think you also got to talk Todd Gurley. Brian, how can I not talk Todd Gurley? This guy is a phenomenal running back. He'll be a running back I guarantee will be drafted in the first round of this year's NFL draft if he decides to opt for that route. And my fourth, just because he's the defending Heisman candidate, I got to talk Jameis Winston. You know, the off-field issues for me haven't sold him as a complete Heisman candidate just yet. But I think, you know, given the numbers he's putting up, he's in the conversation, Brian.
Yeah, and Mike, the one question I have to pose to you, because we have such a solid list of candidates this year. I mean, we may have lost McCarron and Menzel last year, but by no means is college football dead. But Mike, talking about some of the Pac-12 candidates, what does Brett Hundley have to do to get his name onto that bill? Because you just gave us 4 very capable, very talented candidates, and there can only be one winner.
Well, I think for Brett Hundley, you got to meet Mariota blow for blow. You have to put up just as better, if not, you have to put up just as equal, if not better numbers as Marcus Mariota. And I think come crunch time, you know, if you have to beat Oregon, you just have to. You have to beat Oregon, you know, in whatever game you're playing, whether it's a Pac-12 championship game or you know, just a Pac-12 conference game. I think that's the only way that can separate Hundley from Mariota, and you know it's the same for Marcus Mariota too. If he beats Hundley, you know he puts himself above Brett Hundley. So you have to win games, you have to match the guy in stats. But you know, as of right now, I think both of those guys, you know, they're neck and neck.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you do have those other sort of powerhouses in their divisions. Like you had Arizona State absolutely crushed by UCLA. You have Stanford crushed by USC. I don't think they're going to fare very well against Oregon this year. So these two programs are really the emerging programs, and it's really led by Hundley and Mariota.
Yeah, it's Hundley and Mariota. You know, it's an arms race. I love what I'm seeing. So UCLA, Oregon, you know, whenever that is on the schedule, Brian, take a look because it's going to be epic for sure.
Yeah, so let's move into our rising and falling stock. To start with falling stock, let's just mention it briefly. Brady Hoke, I am calling for his job out the window. I'm pretty sure some people in Ann Arbor are calling for his head, but that's a bit violent. So.
Yeah, but we don't want to encourage that. But Brady Stoke, his stock definitely it's taking a turn for the worse, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Then we got to go SMU, Brian. Interesting fact you brought up today. SMU back to back to back to back. That's 4 backs. #1 on CBS Sports bottom 25. Brian, I'm no expert in numbers, but that puts SMU at the bottom a lot of weeks in a row.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's a difference between getting unlucky and just not having the talent to win. And SMU isn't in a very big division, and of course they have some tough opponents like TCU. But I mean, these are guys who are just in dire straits right now. They don't have someone who can take control of the game to win. They don't have a coach that can lead them through the sort of troubled time they're having. And while they may not be the respected programs that we see in a TCU or a Texas or other schools down in that wonderful state, these guys just aren't performing.
No, not performing at all, and you know, it's bad football, so their stock's pretty much at rock bottom, but the good news is you got nowhere to go but up. But Brian, we're going to move to rising stock. I got to talk SEC West here. 4 out of the 6 teams are undefeated, 5 in the top 15. Brian, the SEC West, the dominant conference right now.
Yeah, and even Arkansas, who isn't in that group of 5, is still putting together a very strong season. I mean, they've had a couple tough losses against Auburn and Texas A&M, but besides that, you're looking at Alabama, undefeated, Auburn, undefeated, Ole Miss, undefeated, Mississippi State, undefeated, LSU, 1 loss, but they're still all in the top 15. I mean, Mike, we keep talking about how sort of a changing of the guard with Florida State winning, and you know the Pac-12 coming up strong, but I mean, the SEC football is as good as ever right now.
SEC football is tremendous right now. You know, you could argue that maybe it's a little bit better than last year. So I think, you know, if you're an SEC West kind of guy, if you're just an SEC purist like Brian over here, I think you're happy because you know you're not falling. You know, where the Mountain West has fallen off, the Big 12 has fallen off. The Big 10 is kind of falling off a little bit, but I think right now, SEC, Pac-12, Brian, we're looking at 2 dominant conferences right there.
Yeah, Mike Schiff, and I do have to sort of counter your opinion on the Big 10 because there are 3 teams in the Big 10 that are just on the up and up, and I'm quite surprised. You got Nebraska, of course, biggest one. Let's talk about them first. You got a huge game against Michigan State this week, but Mike, these guys are ranked, they're winning. Of course, they got Amir Abdullah also on the cusp of that Heisman talk. And, I mean, Mike, what's the deal with these guys?
You know, I like Nebraska a lot, but the one glaring issue is, you know, I talked to one of our friends, Scott Ayers, who we'll mention later in the program. He's a friend of ours. He was at the game, and he said the one glaring issue with Nebraska is they don't pass the ball a ton. It's a very run-heavy offense. You know, Amir Abdullah shoulders the load. The guy had, you know, over 200 yards of rushing yards before the 3rd quarter was over. So, I mean, Abdullah's carrying this team, and I think that makes it very dangerous for them just because, you know, as a Vikings fan where, you know, Adrian Peterson has carried the team for the last, you know, however many years. Obviously not the case anymore. You know, being that one-dimensional type of team, Brian, it makes it tough to win tight games because you have to have good quarterback play. And I'm a quarterback purist, obviously, so I think you got to have a guy hucking the ball under center. But why don't you talk about Michigan State, the other side of that coin, who is playing Nebraska this week?
Michigan State, they're a fantastic team. Of course, they had that rough loss early, but they're still a very capable and very talented team. I mean, Sparty's looking to make another run for the Rose Bowl this year, much to the dismay of Michigan fans, but I'll just cast that aside. You know, unbiased journalism is what we're all about. But Mike, moving on, the other two teams in the Big Ten that have really surprised me, one is Iowa. They've really sort of fallen off the map since the end of the Ricky Stanzi era, where they were in the ranked portion, but they're now back. They got a winning schedule. They're looking to come in strong into league play. And then finally, Minnesota claiming the little brown joke from Michigan. They've been looking awesome. They're way ahead of their division rivals in the standings, and I could see these guys making a run for the division title.
I definitely think they could too. You know, we talked about it, you know, from the beginning of the season, beginning of our view from the U season to now. You know, it's an open race right now for the Big Ten. Anyone can win it, probably with the exception of Northwestern and a couple of those lower tier schools. But right now, if you have wins in the win column, Brian, you can compete for the Big Ten. That's just how it is. It's so open right now. It's so great, and that's what I'm loving about the SEC and the Big Ten this year is that you know any team can win it at this point. Any team, any of those 4 out of 6 teams that you were talking about from the SEC West can compete with an SEC East team, and that's what I'm loving. That's why we love college football.
Of course it is. And now let's sum it up by talking about the school of our good friend Zach. Zach, I hope you're watching. TCU finally breaking the top 25 after so long, ever since the Andy Dalton era came to an end. Mike, what do you see in this team that makes them just so special?
You know, I like TCU a lot. They're, you know, obviously they're not going to have the type of quarterback play that Andy Dalton gave them. You know, when he won the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, against Russell Wilson, actually, I think too. Man, we're throwing it back here on the view from the U. But I think I really like what I see out of TCU. Obviously, the Big 12. You know, with the exception of Baylor and maybe a couple other schools, I think they can win it. I really see TCU as a competitor there. You know, you gotta love Texas football, great coaching staff. I love TCU, Brian. I love it a lot.
Especially with that strong UT team, losing that coaching figure, sort of going back into rebuilding year. They're still a promising team, and of course Texas is going to recruit, and they're going to recruit well. But this TCU team is they're really coming up strong, and they haven't made really a run for that national championship since the era when they were bested by Mr. Cam Newton at Auburn, getting that spot. But it's just a bright future for these guys.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. You know, TCU it's an underrated football program, but one that I think that you know they're not going to be in the top. They're not going to be in that college football playoff by any means. But I think going forward, you know, they can make that Big 12 a little bit more of a competition.
Yeah. So Mike, let's finish with a shout out.
A final shout out to a friend of our program, Scott Ayers. Scott did get into the University of Nebraska at Lincoln this past weekend. He went and toured it. He had a great time. Best of wishes to you, Scott. We're super psyched that you got in, buddy. You know, maybe there's a Cornhusker in your future. I love what I'm seeing. Go Big Red. Go Scott Ayers. And on that note, Brian, we're going to have to sign off. I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbuttle.
We'll see you later, ladies and gentlemen. This has been The View from the U.